All right, so we're up to Thomas Pynchon's V, Chapter 5. And I think the nose job chapter was funny, but I think this chapter contains one of the novel's best jokes. And it takes a while to get to the punchline. So you have to stick with how Pynchon's really hard to follow sometimes, how he weaves things. You get all these disparate situations, and you wonder, why the fuck did he just mention this group and that group? And then pretty soon he ties them all together, and there's a punchline. So it's only broken into 2 sections. It's another short chapter, but it's dense, and you really have to follow the connections. Roman numeral 1 and then Roman numeral 2, and it's subtitled, in which a stencil nearly goes west, that is, dies, with an alligator. And then so we return. Last time we saw Benny Profane, he had been hired to hunt alligators in the sewers of New York. And so now here he is, as the chapter opens up, hunting an alligator, and he's hot on its trail. It's a big white albino monstrosity that says, the opening paragraph, this alligator was pinto, pale white, seaweed black. It moved fast, but clumsy. It could have been lazy or old or stupid. Profane thought maybe it was tired of living. You can imagine this alligator just would rather just die, and so it's old and lumberous, probably not much to eat down there except for rats. And rats are a key part of the joke here in this chapter. So he's chasing this alligator, and he's got one of the Hispanic kids named Angel with him, who's supposed to be holding the flashlight, but he's walking behind Profane, and he's drinking wine, so he's not even really paying attention, so the flashlight's all over the place. They've been hired by a man named Zaitsus, whose name, of course, means sweet time, but Zaitsus, but they all like him, and he's the guy that these alligator hunters work for, and he's given them armbands. He's called them the Alligator Patrol, and in green lettering against a yellow band, it says that right on their sleeve, Alligator Patrol. This chapter is just full of one great laugh after the next. And so they're down there, he and Angel, and their immediate foreman is a guy named Bung. And so they go under a manhole cover, and they're looking up at the manhole cover, and then the manhole cover is moved, and then Bung is, of course, looking down through the hole at them, the Bung hole, and he yells at Angel. He says, "I smell alcohol on your breath. You've been drinking, clearly." Angel gets pissed off and climbs up the ladder and then bites him, and then they climb out, and there's a tussle. Profane's still down there now. He's holding the flashlight with the 12-gauge shotgun. And he realizes he can't lose the alligator because his boss knows that, the foreman knows that he's hot on the trail here of this alligator. So he's continuing chasing this alligator. And then begins this chapter where he comes under a part of the city that's called Fairings Parish, and it's named after a priest, a Catholic priest that was named Father Fairing in the 1930s, who set out with the task of Christianizing all the rats. So what he wants to do is, this took place during the 1930s, and he gives the streets, it's the East 80s, somewhere under the East 80s. And so in a parody of like St. Patrick or St. Columba, and Iona is mentioned, arriving in Europe, amongst all these savages and pagans and barbarians, and then Christianizing them, which note is another form of colonialization. We've already seen Europe's attempt to colonialize Africa between the Germans, the French, and the British, and Christianizing the so-called savages is just another form of colonialization. But here it's a parody of it, because he specifically gets it in his head that rats might take over the city, and so they have to be Christianized. So he goes down there to perform an exorcism on the water, brings down a breviary, the catechism, and his cassock, and he sleeps down there. He sets up camp, makes a fire, sets up camp, and sleeps down there and spends the day searching for these rats. And this is going through Profane's head now, so you have to keep this in mind, that it's folklore that he knows about, that he's heard about. So we don't know what the truth status of this is. And he gives the rats the names of saints: Ignatius, Bartholomew, Teresa, and then one named Veronica. And so this is an odd number chapter, chapter 5. So it's a V chapter, sort of, more like a parody of a V chapter. And then but then we get Pynchon actually quotes from journals that Father Faring had left behind, talking about the rats. Journals which he says are kept in the Vatican for some mysterious reason, but Stenzel has read them. And the whole reason why he nearly goes west with an alligator is because he winds up down in the sewers. And Profane accidentally shoots at him, doesn't know who he is. But we'll get to that. And so the journals, so if you read the journals, the priest is talking about the difficulties he's had converting these rats. He gives them each personalities. One of the rats is being unfaithful to another one of the others. Shame on her. And then he's talking too about how he's also eating the rats as food, and he thinks that they're pretty good eating. He says the livers, he wrote, are particularly succulent. And he also likes the tails. He says if you boil the tails long enough, they're pretty good eating. So he's eating the rats while developing emotional relationships with them. So there are several quotes from his journals that the perplexing thing is, if this is running through Profane's mind as folklore, how does he know about the journals? Because these are direct quotes. They're offset block text. Has he read the journals, and what would be the likelihood of that? So it gets a little tangled here about what, again, in Pynchon as the preeminent postmodern author, about what's true and what isn't. So then he develops, Father Faring does, a relationship with V, who is called Veronica here. She's given the name Veronica, which means, of course, true icon, Vera icon, the true image. And then it says that he ends up in a relationship with her, and this rat becomes his mistress, and he's sodomizing the rat. and then he gets very concerned about her well-being, and it says, V came to me tonight upset, and he writes it as V period, just the way Stenzel found the same reference to Victoria Wren as V period in his journals. And Stenzel has read this journal. This is why he goes down to the sewers. He says, V came to me tonight upset. And keep in mind he's referring to a rat. She and Paul have been at it again. That's the infidelity. The weight of guilt is so heavy on the child. She almost sees it as a huge white lumbering beast pursuing her, wanting to devour her. We discussed Satan and his wiles for several hours. V has expressed a desire to be a sister, that is, to be a nun. I explained to her that to date there is no recognized order for which she would even be eligible. She will talk to some of the other girls to see if there's interest widespread enough to require action on my part. It would mean a letter to the bishop, and my Latin is so wretched. And then the very next paragraph, Profane in his head is wondering, Lamb of God, Profane thought. Did the priest teach them rat of God? How did he justify killing them off 3 a day? How would he feel about me or the Alligator Patrol? He checked the action of the shotgun. Here in the parish were twistings, intricate as any early Christian catacomb. No use risking a shot, not here. So this is all going through Profane's mind, so it might be folklore, but then we've got these troubling journals with actual direct quotes, and we know that Stenzel at some point has gotten a hold of them and read them. Perhaps he's gone to the Vatican and pursued these journals, but he picks up the name Veronica, and he thinks that it might refer to V, the V that he's looking for. And then so this middle section pops over to the whole sick crew, in this case, Rooney Winsome, whom we had last seen listening at the bar with Charisma, and Foo with to the jazz of McClintock's Sphere. Here they are in his apartment, and his wife is named Mafia, and she's a writer, and she's an obvious parody of Ayn Rand. She writes novels that are 1,000 pages long, that all espouse her single grand unified theory that life can only be redeemed through heroic love. And he himself, Rooney Winsome, is an executive who works for a record company, and the company is called Outlandish Records. And some of the records that they produce are Volkswagens and Hi-Fi. The Leavenworth Glee Club sings old favorites. So this is not exactly a top-notch record company. And then so he's there with Mafia. She's playing with the cat, naked. Charisma walks by wrapped in a green blanket. He wonders briefly if Charisma's fucking his wife because he seems to remember, Eskimos have the custom of if a guest comes in to stay the night with them, they offer the wife. I hadn't heard that about Eskimos, but it was true about Scandinavians. It was customary if a stranger came through to spend the night that you would offer your wife to the stranger to have sex. Interesting custom. But I wonder why it's the case that it would be shared by the Eskimo and the Scandinavians as well. But he just has this as a passing thought. And then then they get a phone call. They're talking for a bit, and they get a phone call from Rachel Alglass over at her place now. She's looking for Paula Maestro, the 16-year-old girl, and she says, Paula didn't come home last night. Do you have any idea where she's at? And they say, no, we have no idea where she's at. Or Stencil, since remember, Paula lives with both Rachel and Esther, and Stencil has been having sex with Esther, so she knows Stencil is connected. And it's going to turn out, though, that there are connections between Stencil and Paula because Paula is from Malta. She's Maltese, in fact, and Stencil's father, Sidney, died on the island of Malta during the June disturbances in 1919, right at the end of World War I. He'll also come across a journal called The Confessions of Fausto Maestro, who is Paula's father. And in there, there will be references to Father Faring. So all of this will connect together in a dizzying spiral of associations, and it's impossible to figure out what's true here and what isn't in this novel. And Pynchon is having a great time doing that to the reader. So that they say, no, we don't know where she's at. And then so the point of view then pops over through the phone into, now we're in Rachel's apartment, where there's a knock at the door. And Pig Bodine shows up with Foo. Pig is looking for Paula for sexual reasons, obviously, and Rachel's not stupid, and she knows this. She lets them in. They all sit down. They're drinking beer, and she's making fun of Pig. And she's like, you really want to, I'm sure you're looking for platonic reasons, right? And Pig is so dumb, he's like, what's that? What are you talking about? And his friend says, that means not screwing. He's like, why would I do that? I would only do that to an officer, using the word screw in a different sense. He's not a very bright guy. So they're talking for a while. Then the phone rings again near the end of the chapter. And what Rachel picks up the phone, and what she hears on the other side is, remember that Stencil only speaks of himself in the third person. And so she hears, Stencil's just been shot at. He can't say, someone just tried to take a shot at me. It has to be, Stencil's just been shot at. And then she says, all right, where are you? And he says, the address is in the East 80s. I'm here at a coffee shop. I took some buckshot in one of my buttocks. And so he took some buckshot. And so what had happened then, so while he's waiting then for them to come pick him up, for Rachel and Pig and Foo to come pick him up, what has happened is that he has chased a lead to the sewers because he had found out for some reason that an old man that Zeisus had been employing, very old, in his 80s, had been giving tours before the outbreak of World War I, and might have known a woman who might have been V, and might have seen her in connection with the sewers. And so this is the rumor that that somehow Stencil has picked up. And so he gets there and he meets Zeisus, and he realizes that he's running this alligator killing operation. And then he meets the old guy, I think it is. They go out to lunch at a coffee shop, and it says, a few old-timers drifted in with their own memories of these early days in the New York sewers before the Great War. It was only a matter of an hour or so before Veronica was mentioned, a priest's mistress who wanted to become a nun, referred to by her initial in the journal. So Stencil thinks that the priest is referring in the journal to a real woman, an actual mistress, but it's not a mistress, it's a rat that he's been fucking. So the joke's on him. So much for the modernist attempt to create grand meta-narratives. This is Pynchon's. The whole point of this isn't just to be silly, but he's mocking the creation of grand meta-narratives that attempt to explain everything. And Stencil has gone to all of this trouble. He's gone down into the sewer at precisely the point where Profane cornered the alligator and it turned around and he fired his shotgun. And then Stencil picked up some of the buckshot in his ass. Obviously, he had turned and started to run away. And so Profane and Stencil don't meet here. And I'm not sure, I can't remember actually if they ever meet. They probably do at some point. But they don't meet here. So Profane nearly kills him. And what does that say about the postmodern attitude toward truth and modernists and, and the death of such philosophers who create such systems? Pynchon's having a good time here in this novel. And it's very, very funny to get a guy this bright, at this level of genius, who also has such a comic, vaudevillian sense of humor. Fun stuff. Okay, so next we'll move on to Chapter 6, in which Profane returns to street level.